Good morning, Upper 6th. So here we are. Paper 3, Research Theme 2025, the music industry. Similar bullet points than in previous years, but totally different themes. So we've got Universal Music coming in next week to help us with some of the bullet points as well. So once their PR team has given me authorization to share the video, I will share that with anyone who's willing to watch it. But for now, there's two key documents before we get started on this first bullet point, consumer trends. So I've put the QR codes up for you. Please download these documents, save them, use them. There's loads of brilliant case studies in here. So the top one up here is looking at global music, focuses a lot on streaming, CDs, vinyls, recording artists, trends in different countries. A brilliant document. And I've used some of these case studies for writing essay style questions for you. The bottom one, as you can see, is the UK music industry. In addition to the themes that I've mentioned, the top report covers, it also looks at live music venues, entrepreneurialism, and those sorts of things as well. It's very interesting that we will also cover retail in this as well. It's obvious that some people are running businesses just for the love of it and clearly not for profit, which some of you might struggle with the concept of running a business that is actually losing money and you need to constantly bail it out. Maybe there's the glimmer of hope in the future that it will make money. Maybe you just love being surrounded by vinyl. We will explore that later. Now, before we move on, it's important that we think about our ethnocentric, geocentric, polycentric global marketing strategies that we've looked at in class. And I've added another one up there, which you can clearly see my spell check didn't like. So we're looking at those ethnocentric brand identity. It may be my brand identity is American country, and actually that's how I'm branded. I'm targeted at people that get it. I'm not targeted at countries or consumers that don't like it. Then if we skip over to geocentric, we're looking at the Taylor Swifts of this world. We're looking at that global brand with some local tweaks. So I'm thinking that Swift doesn't really change her songs that much, but she might change the marketing mix slightly. So in the UK, and I'll show you to remind you of this in a second, we can buy vinyls of her new albums and new singles when they come out. When we're in Japan, 100% streaming. Okay, so we've got local tweaks to the global brand that is Taylor Swift. We don't really think of her as an American brand. We're thinking of her as that global Coca-Cola, McDonald's brand. I'm sure she won't appreciate the analogy. I apologise. And then we've got our polycentric, which is we've got our own strategy for each market. That doesn't mean we totally change the brand. Doesn't mean we totally change the product. It means we're tweaking it for each. And this is probably where we're going to see collaborations come in. And it might be that we have an ethnocentric brand being introduced to a wider market, and we use a collaboration with a brand that that market understands and loves. So here's some examples. So Morgan Wallen, very big country music star, and only targeted at English-speaking countries. We've already mentioned our Taylor Swift and the example of the Era Tour, for example, and obviously vinyl editions in the UK, and thinking about how it's pushed out with streaming mostly in other countries as well. Vinyl is getting quite trendy, but is it trendy in all markets? Maybe not. Well, if it's not, then maybe don't waste your money on printing the vinyls. Then we've got a different term here that we've not introduced in class really, but I think it's quite important to understand this. So when the original model came out in the 1960s for ethnocentric and etc., there was also regiocentric as well. And this is where regional tastes are targeted. So instead of a country based, we're talking about an entire region. And we see this with some parts of Asia that are focused with K-pop those sorts of things. So think about this from a polycentric approach aimed at an entire region. And then we've got our polycentric, and we can see the example here. We've got a Latin American star, Karol G, and she's done a collaboration with Shakira, who's obviously a bit more of a global brand and much loved in some of the countries that Karol G is trying to get presence in. So here's a case study that I'd like you to pause the video and to read, and we'll come back to this with a 20 marker at the end of the video. But we can see here we've got Jon Batiste, massive US jazz and soul artist. Now, US jazz, think about that as a brand identity. We've got that possible ethnocentric brand identity there. Soul artist isn't just in the United States, but you know, we think of soul as, you know, James Brown, that type of thing. And so he's gained national recognition before signing with Verve Records, which sought to expand his global reach. So if we were planning this, we would be thinking, okay, well, this is an aim, and it's probably going to be the hook in the question. The label could market him using option 1, ethnocentric, option 2, geocentric. So we know what we're going to need to define, and we need to know the pros and cons at the top of our head so we can go and get some evidence from the case study. So evaluate these two options, recommend which one is most suitable. Well, if we're recommending something that's most suitable to what? Well, it's going to be the aims of the company, isn't it? Up here, global reach, to maximize his international success. Well, that's going to be linked to the words global reach as well. So it's most suitable to maximize his international success. Hooks are always repeated twice. In this case, I've used slightly different words. In the more modern past papers for 20 markers, you will see they use exactly the same words to make it easy for you. Obviously, you're not going to end your chains of argument with therefore gaining international success. You're going to talk about that, record sales, sold out concerts, premium prices for tickets for concerts, all the other things that are hopefully going to be in this case study. Okay, we'll come back to this later, but keep this case study in mind as we go through the rest of the video. So let's get some stats. Now, your research theme is from here to here. So the 10 years is what they ask us to look at when we're looking at trends. But actually, just looking at 10 years doesn't give you the full story. So we've got from 1999, way before any of you were born. So back in the day, you can see over here, we're selling only physical stuff. And in 1999, that would be predominantly CDs. We'd abandoned vinyl. Vinyl was just old-fashioned. Some DJs maybe, a bit of retro going on, but we wanted to modernise the digital sound, and that wasn't through scratchy old records. And then we can see that actually we start to see, and I'm sure there are performances in here as well, by the way, but remember the unit descriptors up here are billions of dollars, and maybe it's a fraction of the market. And we've got lots of things going on television. Top of the Pops in the UK was massive, and it was good at promoting music. Then we've got some more growth in our actual performance. And here, if we look in 2003, we can see we've got a growth in the download industry. But look what's happening to the overall revenue. So our overall revenue in the global recorded industry is declining. And this seems a bit odd, really, because we've got globalization going on, we've got emerging markets earning more money per capita, so the average disposable income's increasing. Why, oh why, is the global revenue going down? Well, one word, piracy. So what we see is lovely little internet sites popping up. Napster's a great example. I was definitely one of the guilty people that were downloading illegal music, not paying for anything, and we saw a growth in the strategy towards live performances. There was lots of news out at the time saying the future of music is doomed, everyone's pirating it, we're not getting enough money, and therefore we're just going to do loads and loads of live performances. So we saw this growth in live performances. We've seen a growth in, obviously, downloads, but a lot of people are just downloading it for free through illegal sites. Then we start seeing a growth in streaming. You can see here the white and yellow sections here start to grow a little bit, and this is because we were streaming music over computers at the time, and then smartphones started to get better. What you would call 2G changes to 3G to 4G, now obviously 5G, and when it moved to 4G, music streaming really took off because we could download the digital content, and it was fantastic. And the great thing is, the piracy sort of forced the streaming companies not to try and charge too much money, because if you charge me too much money, I'll just download it for free from, even though Napster was closed down, can't remember what date. There'll be other streaming sites that I can just download illegal stuff from. Now, what the streaming companies did is they came up with the lovely phrase. I think it was Spotify that came up with this: freemium. Instead of premium, we've got freemium. Yeah, so it's an odd made-up word, but actually it's free. I can listen as much as I like, as long as I can tolerate an advert every now and then. Okay, so as data speeds speed up, as more people are streaming on mobile phones, we see that revenue's still going down. And here we get to 2014, the start of your research theme. Now, and this is why I've been going on about 1999 to now, because if you've got a case study from 2014 to 2023, it's rapid growth in recording industry revenues. But if you don't know the story of why it's at that level first and why things are so rapid, this looks like everyone in the world is suddenly consuming so much more music. Well, they might be because of mobile phones and streaming, and we can see that in the rapid growth of streaming figures. But there's been a shift away from pirating music, and we can't underestimate how much this was costing the music industry at the time. So as we see, we've got a rapid growth in streaming, we've got a rapid decline in downloads. We're not going to buy our albums much anymore, because, why should you? I still have albums that I've paid for in my iTunes account, and I still listen to them sometimes. Other than that, I stick Spotify, and because I'm only a poor Dalmatian, I don't pay for the premium service. Premium service, the revenues will go to the recording artists. Next to nothing per tune, but they go to the recording artists. All the recording artists complain that they don't get enough money per track, but before, their tracks were being pirated and they were getting probably less than they are at the moment. I think Spotify pays about £7,000 per 1 million listens. That's not a lot, but it's £7,000 more than they were getting before. So we've talked about the decline in here, physical decline as well. Now we've seen this rapid decline in physical, and now we're starting to see this go back up. And this is the revival of vinyl. Okay, so this chart shows a lot. Okay, we then start with other, whatever the other is, and we've got performances seem to be, well, they look like they're slightly increasing to me. If I had the figures in front of me, it'd be helpful, but they're definitely bigger than what they were down here in 2014. So we've got lots, and this is revenues, remember, and if you've been to a concert really recently, you will know how much it costs to go to a concert, and I'm hoping that we will get a surge pricing case study. I'm hoping we'll get a PED case study where my sensitivity to price is a bit different for Taylor Swift than it is for some of the lesser acts. We might get a hotel room price in, I don't know where she put, was it Glasgow, her last concert in Scotland? And there was an article in the Times that was saying about all the surge in hotel rooms. Expect that sort of question to do with pricing. If we get live music and Glastonbury or Taylor Swift or something like that, expect some form of PED related question. Let's hope so anyway. So, and there's some figures for you of changes in the global revenue. Okay, so this is the same figures in a different format, and what we can see here is what you see. Let's compare it. Now, remember we've told you about the trends between these. Now, if we look at downloads, we can see there is a massive difference in the downloads, okay? And that's a telling. Just take one number away from another and talk about the decline. That's easy. But if we look at physical 43, 18. Now, if we've only got those two bits of data, we would say that they're rapidly declining. And we know in the last couple of years, actually, they've started to increase. So this is where the research theme comes in. Depending on what data they give you in the paper, depends how you're going to interpret it. But if you take this at face value, this data doesn't actually show you that physical is actually starting to increase. Okay, really quite important there. And we can see our performances, 14 and 9. According to this, they've gone down over that amount of years. Maybe they're starting to go back up again. I don't know. So we shall see. But you've got loads and loads of data there. And clearly, it's quite easy to do a calculation with it. Some interesting trends that you're going to need to know about. Clearly, we understand that the industry is growing and it continues to grow. And there's lots and lots of revenue going into the industry, and there's lots of wonderful collector's items like vinyl. Look at this, this is Taylor Swift's album, a beautiful vinyl in there, and we've literally got a book with lots of images, and this is collector's item stuff. This is stuff for a bookshelf. This is something to be cherished and not just to be listened to. So what they're doing is they're adding value to a product. Vinyl is a bit more niche, a bit more luxury. You've got the tangible product that you can touch and hold and clean and love. And also, you know, you've got something quite nice for display as well. So this is very interesting. So if you think about Taylor Swift's Tortured Poet, we've got that many copies, but that many were sold on vinyl. Quick percentage, and we can see the importance of vinyl when she released a new CD, a new album even. Look at that language. And it's really important that we understand that different markets have got different expectations of vinyl, and in some countries, no vinyl will be released. Now, if we're thinking about the growth, yes, we've got that all-time record in growth, and vinyl sales are up, but not just retro stuff. So when I went onto Amazon and I looked at screenshots to put in your presentation, and Amazon for vinyl comes up with stuff that my mum used to listen to, and I was born in the early 1970s. And then when you think about actually going into record shops, you're seeing new releases like the Taylor Swift album being sold on vinyl. Okay, so there's different markets, different distribution channels, and we're suddenly thinking about place in the marketing mix. Really interesting. So this chap here that I'd never heard of, nice dogs, and 2 million sales. Yeah, so this is a global phenomenon. Maybe it's more popular in one country than others, and suddenly we've got different product life cycles in different markets, different marketing strategies in different markets, and we might have ethnocentric marketing for this artist in one country, and then we might move it to another in another. So it's really interesting how we're going to be presenting these essay questions. So, and we've got some other artists there for good measure. Now, when we're talking about UK only artists, so we've got Charlie XCX Brat, She was the #1 UK artist last year, but she was actually 9th overall out of all the artists to do with UK sales. Our culture is dominated by the United States. Our music is dominated by the United States and Canada, and then there's a smidgen of other stuff in there as well. So if we think about it, for decades our music has been dominated by North America, and every now and then we get a superstar that comes through. #9 was Coldplay. They've been here for years, which is amazing, but that means that we've only got 2 UK artists in our own top 10, and also globally. Overall, yep, and some more stats. So if you think about the economic impact, we could get a UK economy question. So think back to the Pfizer question about Ireland. Should the Irish government encourage multinational corporations to relocate to Ireland? And we looked at that from a local economy to a national economy. We thought about components of GDP, circular flow of income, and those macroeconomic objectives. We could get a similar question about the UK. We could get, should there be tax breaks for music studios? Should there be extra funding for Falmouth University, who are so brilliant at performing arts degrees? It could be those sorts of things. So you need to be ready for those, and we will cover some country-based questions in class, but don't just think about the companies. So we've got a number of data here. You can number of data here. You can see that it's broken down into quarters, and you'll know how many months a quarter is. And with all data, we can interpret it in different ways. So we've got quarterly sales, music production. Always look for the unit descriptors. This is millions of pounds per quarter. And we can see that 2014, we've got obviously that figure there. And we could just smooth the data out. I won't draw the line in, but just smooth it out, and we can say that it's a increase. We could do a percentage change between these two figures. We could turn around and say, well, I wonder what happened here related to a global pandemic. And more recently, we've seen a bit of a dip, and it's going back up again. So depending what range of data the chief examiner gives us, it depends how you're probably going to interpret it. But remember, lovely phrases like, if this trend continues. Well, if this trend continues, maybe we're going to have slower growth. If we're just looking at this, if we go from here to here, if this trend continues, maybe we'll have steeper growth. So there's lots of ways of interpreting this data. Have fun with it, okay? Do a percentage change, and that's 139% in real terms. And if we were lucky enough, if the examiner was generous enough to give us inflation figures, we could work that figure out after inflation, and it's just under 100% increase in the last 10 years. So that's not too bad if you think about it. Other factors to take into account, well, yeah, so there's a lot happening, and we understand that the music industry is, I don't know, we've got loads of English language stuff out there, but it's not just about English language. And we're seeing more of a global approach in the movie industry, which is directly linked to music as well. Most movies have got soundtracks, for example. And I don't know, we'll see what happens. Okay, but there's loads of Swifties out there and those sort of big global artists. K-pop is growing, and think about that regiocentric term that I've introduced. And yes, there's massive power of distribution here. And we've got Universal Studios, like I've said, coming in next week into school. So we're very lucky to have Hallam coming in. And it was interesting, a couple of weeks before we had his brother Brogan come in, who runs TikTok Shop, and very interesting. You think about Amazon, you think about TikTok Shop. TikTok Shop is tiny at the moment in the UK, but absolutely massive in Asia. Is this the rising star of the future? Will we be buying our vinyl from TikTok Shop, for example? and there's a different way of shopping. So it might be that someone's doing a TikTok recording, playing some vinyl records, and I buy the vinyl when I'm listening to it. It is the way that shopping is moving towards, more experience-led shopping. And watch this space, because we may not know much about TikTok Shop at the moment. They've recently put their commissions up, which might put some resellers off, but maybe it's the future. So, and I'm going out later to get my hair cut for the new punk style. Anyway, so back to our 20 marker. Now, when we first looked at this question, we first of all wanted to understand the context of it. We've got the US jazz soul artist. He's got national recognition. He's now signed a recording contract with a global record label, and the company wants to, first part of an aim, global reach. The label could, option 1, option 2, evaluate these two options, and most suitable, there's a common part of a hook. Hooks have always got two parts, and the second part is always linked to an aim, and we've got maximise his international success. Okay, so international, global reach, same sort of thing. So we're looking for factors of success, and that's selling more records, that's selling out at concerts, that's doing multiple concerts, streaming, all of number of downloads. We need context here. All starts with a good definition. We've got the structure there. You'll notice that the conclusion and justification is not on the screen. We're going to spend a bit of time on that. This is not an answer. This is just giving you some pros and cons from the case study. Now, when you're writing your chains of argument, I'm expecting a quote in each of them. And the reason for that is I want you to remember to use the case study. Just quoting it's not good enough. It's all about interpretation. And remember, we've got ethnocentric, geocentric. We could be talking about risk. We could be talking about which one will be most successful. And we could squeeze a bit of Ansoff language in here, as long as it doesn't turn into an Ansoff essay, because you'll be answering the wrong one. So here's our pro and our definition. So an ethnocentric approach means using the same marketing strategies worldwide, focusing on Batiste, US-based jazz and soul identity without adapting to different markets. Now, if you can write a contextualized definition, number one, you're going to get some extra marks at the beginning of your essay. Number two, is going to wow the examiner. They're going to read this and think, this is a level 4 essay, hopefully. And then hopefully you can persuade them to leave you in level 4 as they read through it. Also, you'll know what you're going to look for evidence-wise in the case study. Now, if you're struggling with this type of question, just write the textbook ethnocentric definition, and the structure of that definition will help you to look for the evidence. My advice, and this will vary from teacher to teacher, is write the definition of the first point first, then go and read the case study and get the evidence, and have geocentric in your head, because you'll come across that evidence as you go. Especially for the 10s and 12s, writing the definition first gives you clarity and focus. There's no point reading the case study twice, is there? Because you haven't got enough time. So we've got some pros there. So we've got, preserving that artistic identity. He is American jazz, yeah? Cost effective, because you haven't got to change your marketing strategies, and you're thinking about the US prestige in jazz. He's a globally recognized brand, yeah? And if he's part of it, there may be some benefits to his aspirations of downloads internationally. So we've got some negatives there. Yes, there might be some markets that don't really really like the American jazz, so maybe you need to change it a little bit if you want to build rapport with this growing global market. Remember, constantly coming back to that hook. Yeah, so maybe you can read the rest there. So underutilises international collaborations, and we can see that he's already done some collabs. So maybe they've done this for a reason, to bring him into rapport with the consumers. Remember, if he becomes too niche, Mass and niche markets are on a spectrum like ethnocentric to polycentric. It's more or less. And if you've got a mass market appeal here, then we need to make him more mass market. And maybe that's when you localize some of your marketing with a bit of geocentric approach. Here we go. So adapting the market promotional strategies to each market. Now remember, if this was regiocentric, we could be focusing on a region. Regiocentric will not be in the exam paper because it's not in the A-level spec. So you could be thinking about a geocentric approach for a region. Okay, so go careful directly answering the question. So we've got some maximizes international appeal, enhances the streaming growth because we've got some figures in the case study that says that, and we're thinking about that cross-cultural collaboration, and we've got other artists that have been working with him to help him achieve that. And then we've got higher marketing costs because we've got a different marketing strategy, and maybe you risk losing your core identity. Okay, so we've done a lot on McDonald's in class, as you'd expect, and the further McDonald's menu moves away from its American roots, other than the golden arches over the door and the packaging that your food comes in, is it really McDonald's? Well, as long as people still buy fast food, they won't care. But if they lose their identity totally, then maybe they lose their USP in the marketplace. So you have to go careful of diluting your brand too much. Going to focus a bit on the conclusion here. Now, most of you can write well. Most of you can write your chains of argument, your balanced arguments. You're fine with that. You're using quotation. You're using terms like this could be interpreted as. This might help them maximize sales of CDs or something. What some of you are struggling with is conclusions. So we would, at this point, take a breath, reread the question, and we'd do a one-liner. Overall, to successfully expand, Jon Batiste global reach, Verve Records should adopt a geocentric marketing approach. I've answered the question. Now, for some of you, this is where some of you should stop, especially if this is the first 20 marker. You should just move on to the next 8 marker and save some time. If you just repeat an argument that you've already written in your points, you ain't going to get any more marks for it. All you're going to do is waste time. If you are one of those students that says it depends on, and then you don't actually explain the it depends on factor in context, or it's just some abstract rubbish that you've remembered from a revision video or a good essay that you've had marked in class, and you think you can superimpose abstract, superficial comments on your justification, don't bother writing it. I encourage you to think about how to write contextually. I encourage you to think about your 20 markers are quite easy to write justifications for, because all you have to do is you've got to badmouth the competition. So we've said that geocentric is the best approach. So I want to know why you've not chosen ethnocentric, and I want to know that in context. So here's an example of something that I mean. So an ethnocentric approach risks limiting Jon Batiste's international appeal, and we've chucked some evidence in there. 50% streaming, 30% increase in Europe, 25% expansion in Asia were driven by targeted marketing, international collaborations and local audience engagement, all of which an ethnocentric strategy would overlook. Okay, now this is introducing some things that have been said in the essay. I'll give you that, but this is the way that we write our 10s and 10s and 12 mark justifications. Usually, not always, are considering the alternative without using acid test ratio. We might miss out on this. So we're thinking about the opportunity cost here. And every 20 mark essay, well, not every, most 20 mark essays are going to be opportunity costs because you've chosen one option over another. Okay, so we need to make sure that we work on contextualizing our justifications and think in this case why you didn't choose ethnocentric. And the term we use in class is we badmouth the competition. Okay? If you struggle with this and you don't actually write much, or it makes any sense, or your teacher is telling you, well, I'm not giving you marks for your justification because you've not added something to the argument. That's a common phrase from teachers. They want to see a bit more. Don't bother writing it. Move on. If you've done everything else correct and you've answered the question, you're probably going to get bottom level 4. Bottom level 4's 15 out of 20. That's 75%. That's A star. If you can get that, if you can get level 4 on all of your answers, of level 3 with the 8 marker, you're going to be sitting on mid 70%. That's party zone. That's A star material. That's going to the university of your dream. If you waste time writing waffle in your 20-mark justifications and you've spent too much time on the 8s and 10s, the easy questions that are a time trap, you're going to be having blank pages in your paper and you're not going to be living the dream. You're probably going to be coming out on a C or a D grade. Anyway, on that high note, thank you very much for your time. Have a good day.